he poured the poison in the glass and he forced me to drink it. Now I'm 12. He's 38 years old. Then he pulled over. We were out very rural, nothing around but maybe a farmhouse, no lights, just woods. And he pulled over into this little pull-off and he turned the car off, reached over and started strangling me. Then he gets out of the car. I hear the trunk slam. He gets back in the car and I started screaming and I turned around and it was a hatchet and he began beating me.
Welcome to God's Voice Daily. I'm your host, Vladimir Proknivsky, and this is the channel where I share daily phone calls with people from around the world who've had real supernatural encounters with Jesus, angels, demons, and everything in between. Some of these calls go on to become full episodes on our main show called God's Voice Today, but here you will hear them raw and unfiltered, just the way they happened. So without any further ado, let's dive into today's featured call. Enjoy. Well, Mary, I'm looking forward to hearing your testimony.
Oh, yeah. You just gave me my opening line because I share it wherever I go when anybody asks me how I am. It's the greatest opening line ever because I say I'm above ground. And then I say, do you know why I say above ground? And then I share my testimony. It's just incredible. God gave me a great opening.
Wow. Tell me more.
Yeah. All right. So the abbreviated version, the main event happened when I was 12 years old. So it was February 13th, 1967, and I was going to go to the store to get my mother a Valentine card. And an uncle lived with us at the time. He was my father's brother. He was recently divorced. My mother took him in probably about a year before. Our father was not living with us. My parents were separated when I was 5, and when I was 6, our father just disappeared. Nobody knew where he went. We never heard from him. And so we grew up on welfare. My mother was raised in an orphanage. She didn't have any family members, but my father's family hung around, so he was always kind to us, blah, blah, blah. What you didn't know was he was molesting me from the time I was 9 to the time I was 12. And then when I was 12, my mother was going to get remarried, and the guy she was going to marry didn't want our uncle living with us, so he told him he had to get out. And so we think that's what made him snap even more. So he said he would take me to the store, but he didn't. Instead, he stopped at a liquor store, got some liquor. I saw that box of rat poison on the back seat. Didn't think anything of it because we would have a mouse occasionally. But then he drove about an hour away and he brought me to a motel where he had never brought me to a motel before. And he sexually abused me. Now, he didn't rape me because he was impotent. He was always impotent, thank God. But he still sexually assaulted me. And then the liquor he had been drinking in the motel room, he poured the poison in the glass and he forced me to drink it. I didn't want to. I was hysterical, crying, trying to do everything I could to get out of it, but he forced me to drink it, forced it down my throat. And now I'm 12. He's 38 years old. And I ended up throwing it up in the toilet. And then I don't know how many minutes later, I laid on the bed. And before I knew it, he was on top of me with a pillow, trying to smother me to death. And I'm fighting, kicking, punching, doing everything I could to get him off of me. And I don't know how many minutes that went on. But eventually he stopped and he just slumped over in exhaustion. And then so many minutes later, he was pacing. And then he said, let's go. And he took me out. I thought, okay, now my nightmare is going to be over with. He's going to bring me home. It's now very late at night. And he went in the opposite direction of home. He kept driving south, which he had been doing. And then he pulled over. We were out very rural, nothing around but maybe a farmhouse, no lights, just woods. And he pulled over into this little pull-off. And he just turned the car off, reached over and started strangling me. And I fought so hard, we ended up in the back seat with him, with his hands still around my throat, fighting. And at this point, I even tried to die. I said, all right, I want to get this over with. And I tried not to fight, but then the need for oxygen kept me hitting, pulling, trying to pull his hands off my throat, scratching. And then once again, he stopped and he slumped over in exhaustion. Then he tells me to get in the front seat. Now, by now, I'm in a state of shock, obeying his every command. So I get in the front seat. He's in the front seat. Then he gets out of the car. I hear the trunk slam. He gets back in the car, and I saw a handle slip in his left pocket of his tweed blazer, and it looked like the handle of a hammer. It was a wooden handle. And I started screaming, and I actually did try to grab the handle to get out. He pulled the hood of my jacket, and I turned around, and it was a hatchet, and he began beating me. He hit me on the top of the head, over my left ear, and right over my left eyebrow. I still have that scar. You can barely see it. And then all of a sudden, he dropped it. He dropped it on the floorboard. Somehow I got it. I opened up the door and I threw it out. And he slumped over the steering wheel and he's crying. And the story we were told later on, I'm fast forwarding, is that he told the police that God made him stop. And then he had a mutual friend of my mother's, and she told my mother he had told her that he had seen a vision of St. Anthony. Now, he was very religious, and St. Anthony was his favorite saint. And so he told her that he had seen a vision of St. Anthony, and that's what made him stop. Now, I don't think he saw a vision of St. Anthony. I think it could have been an angel, but I didn't see anything. But all I know was he stopped, completely stopped, was crying, and then he started the car. He pulls into, he drives up to a little gas station that had a store, and there was a restroom on the side. And he brought me into the restroom to try to wash up. And I saw myself in the mirror. I had no whites to my eyes. My nose was swollen. The gash over my left eye, there was, the skin was hanging down. My head was covered with blood everywhere. I'm shaking. I'm crying. I'm hysterical. He wants me to wash the blood off. He gets a Band-Aid out of the vending machine. And then he takes me out and he drives to, and back in those days, there was these drive-in fast food places where you just pull up, you order something from outside. And he bought me something to eat. But there was an outside phone booth outside there back in those days in the 60s. This was 1967. So he hands me the bag to of food, and he said he was going to make a call, and I threw the food out the window. And it was later on, it wasn't until years later after I became a Christian and told my mother about that call. She said he called her first, said his car broke down, but she said if he didn't get me home right away, she was going to call the police. And I think she scared him so much that his next call was to the police. I think he felt safer with the police than he did with my mother, because she definitely would have killed him. So then he calls the state police and he gets back in the car. He says he's turning himself in, but not before he swore me to secrecy. I could never tell about the murder attempts. I couldn't tell about the sexual assault. All I was to say was he took me for a ride. He pulled over, started beating me. And that's what I said. So he brought me to the state police station. As soon as I got there, they took me to the hospital. I got stitches, checked me for rape, brought me back. My mother met us there because the police called my mother. They brought me back to the police station. I gave a statement to the police. I never saw my uncle after that day. And then that was when, later on we were told, my mother told me that he had said God made him stop, but I couldn't accept that. I was so traumatized by what I went through, and that I just couldn't hear that, because we went to a Catholic school. My mother got us into Catholic school for free. She had connections with the nuns, and I was taught about God, but it was like a fairy tale. It was like, well, it was head knowledge, but I didn't know him personally. And I thought, well, he certainly forgot about me if he's real. That's how I felt, that he forgot about me. So my uncle, at first he pled not guilty, then he pled guilty. They sentenced him to 2 years for second-degree assault, and then the judge suspended the whole sentence. He never served 1 day. But but I kept all those secrets inside until I became a Christian 14 years later. And it affected me. I was the perfect daughter. Up till that, I was a perfect daughter. After that, I was the perfect daughter. I was an honors student, did everything perfect, got a scholarship for secretarial school. But then, after I started working, I started going out with some coworkers. Before that, I was very shy. Never dated in high school. Very, very shy and introverted. So I start going out to the nightclubs with my friends, and I was so shy that I drank. But I didn't just drink. I drank in excess, severe excess. Started smoking pot and hashish, no hard drugs. I drank so much that the next morning I would wake up and look to see if my car was there because I couldn't even remember driving home. So this went on in my early 20s for about 6 to 7 years. But unbeknownst to me, I found out when I was 26, but when I was 24, this man that worked in my building, he was a Christian. Now, I did not know any Christians at the time. He went home to his wife and he said, there's a sad-looking young woman in our office, and I feel like God asked me to pray for her. So they prayed for me for 2 years. And during those 2 years, a lot happened during those 2 years after I look back on it, where God was drawing me to him. And then one of my friends becomes a Christian, and she was more wild than I was. And so then Christmas night, 1980, the hole in my heart was so big that I just couldn't take it anymore. I just wished I had never been born. I wasn't suicidal, but I wished I had never been born because I felt like this dark cloud had followed me because I picked all the wrong men because I didn't feel like anybody would want me. I felt shame, guilt, dirty, ugly, different from every woman. I mean, who went through what I went through? I just felt like the odd duck. And I felt like my uncle had ruined my life. I hated him with a passion. I wanted him dead, but not just dead. I wanted him tortured to death, and I wanted to watch the torture. So my best friend becomes a Christian, and it's like, yeah, I know all about that. I went to Catholic school. I worked for the priest in the rectory in high school. I know all about that, but I didn't understand what she was saying at the time. But then she said, God would forgive you, wipe your slate clean. And that Christmas night, as I laid in my bed, it just sounded like too good to be true. I thought, well, I've done a lot, all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll for 6 to 7 years with these guys in my wild lifestyle, because I was like so perfect and innocent before then. And I laid in bed and I asked Jesus to come into my life and take over and forgive me for everything. And my life dramatically changed, and it's been 44 years. And so the next day I got up and I felt like this weight that I had carried around me my whole life was just gone. And I found a little New Testament that a priest had given me in high school, and I never opened it up. And I started reading the New Testament. Then I got a Bible, and I was going to church. I started at a Pentecostal church of all things, and then I went to evangelical. I was either in church or Bible study every night, and reading my Bible over and over and over. And God used the word to heal me. Before I became a Christian, I had this terrible why me attitude, like, why me? What did I ever do to anybody? But after I became a Christian, I realized that God had intervened and spared my life. After I told my family what happened, and my mom reiterated that story that she had heard, that the police said God made him stop, and her friend said he had seen a vision. And I realized that God had intervened to spare my life. And then somebody gave me this bookmark one day at a church service in the very beginning when I became a Christian. It's from Isaiah. See, I did not forget you. I have carved you on the palm of my hand. And it was the first time I felt like God was really speaking to me. And he said he hadn't forgotten me, that he was the reason why I survived. So anyway, even people at work, everybody was saying, what happened to Mary? What happened to Mary? I just was so radically changed. I went from a sad-looking young woman to just always having a smile on my face, being happy, so grateful. And I was so grateful to God that I wanted to forgive my uncle. I found his phone number through a relative. I called him. I told him I forgave him. The conversation lasted about a minute. And I felt like I did what God wanted me to do, and that was it. But I still felt like someday he's going to go to hell for what he did, because that's what he deserved. But it wasn't my business. I did what God wanted me to do, and I forgave him. And I felt, I did the right thing. And so I started praying for a husband. I had made a list of exactly what I was looking for in a husband. And I stopped going to the bars. I wasn't smoking pot. I wasn't smoking cigarettes. I wasn't drinking. I didn't do any of that stuff anymore. I wasn't swearing. Just a completely different person. And people said, well, what do you think? God's just going to drop him in your lap? And one day at work, 7 years after I started praying, this man from Virginia, now I'm in upstate New York, I'm working in an office, this man from Virginia, a CPA, gets sent to do a month-long audit. 2 years later, we were married, and we've been married for 35 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we just had our 35th anniversary. The second time he took me to lunch, I went home and called my mother, and I said, I just met the man I'm going to marry.
Wow.
He was not looking for a wife at all, but God had other plans for him.
It's interesting.
So then,
before you go on, it's interesting, the story that you say that you kind of wrote out specifics, right? What you were looking in a husband. And my wife did the exact same thing. Every year she writes, has these goals. And she kept that notebook, and not long ago, she read the husband that she was looking for. And it's funny, it's like she described me. So there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah. Well, I got so mad at God because it was taking so long that one time I tore up the list and threw it away. I only had 2 dates in 7 years. But anyway, all things in time, God was working behind the scenes and I didn't know it. And he had to heal me of the past. It took a while. It wasn't an overnight thing, of all these negative emotions, the shame and the low self-esteem and, all that stuff. As I read the word, I really attribute it to reading the word. So we got married in 1990. And then God began to deal with me to pray for my uncle. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to see him in heaven. If I prayed for him and he became a Christian, I thought, well, then I'm going to see him in heaven. And I don't want to see him in heaven because I already had to deal with him on earth. So crazy thinking, but I just wasn't at that place at that time. So then in 2001, I shared my story on the 700 Club. I submitted it 4 years earlier. 4 years later, I get an email saying, are you still interested in sharing your testimony? So it was called Dark Family Secrets. The episode was so popular that they had over 6,000 people called for prayer and hundreds gave their lives to Christ. And the following year, they called me again and said, well, we want to come back, re-interview part of your story, put up a Christmas tree, make it more like a Christmas story because you became Christian Christmas night. And for years, I had prayed that God would bring good out of what happened to me, just like he did to Joseph in the Old Testament, how he brought good out of that. And after I shared my story on the 700 Club, I saw the good that God brought out of it, and I started praying for my uncle. And I thought, wouldn't this be something? He's lived a terrible life his whole life. He became an alcoholic. He just destroyed the one life that God gave him, and Satan's bringing him to hell. And I thought, wouldn't this be something if I could grab him right out of Satan's clutches as Satan's trying to pull him into hell? So I prayed for him for about 7 years. And then in 2009, I get a phone call from a relative saying my uncle wants to call me. Would I talk to him? He had been trying to reach me. He wanted to apologize. He's now 80 years old, and I think I'm 54 at the time. And I said, sure, I'll talk to him. And because the timing was perfect, because of what happened on the 700 Club and me seeing the good that God brought out of it and me praying for him. When I started to pray for him, it was like it broke the chain, like I was free from him, totally free for the first time, just totally free. Before it was like maybe 90% free, but once I prayed for him, I just was completely free. from what happened and from him. So after I got that call that he was going to call me, I hung up the phone, and I knew I only probably had seconds because they said he had been trying to reach me, but I was at work and I had just gotten home from work. The phone rang. I said, but before it rang, I said, Holy Spirit, please take over. Well, that is exactly what happened. I answered the phone. He was crying. We were on the phone for 2 hours.
Wow.
I told him I forgave him.
Chills.
I led him to Christ. I prayed with him, led him to Christ, told him I'd send him a Bible. I sent him a Bible. Before the call ended, he said, can I call you in a few months? I said, a few months? I'm going to call you next week because I felt like I needed to mentor him. He had become estranged from all family members. He had been estranged, didn't have any friends. So he was in and out of the hospital the next 6 weeks. I'd call him every week, find out, oh, what are you doing in the hospital? I said, we have work to do. And he told me he felt like he found a friend. Oh, only God could do something like this.
Mary, you're going to make me cry. You're going to make me cry. God gave me compassion for this man. God actually used me, just like I said, Holy Spirit, please take over. And as I would go to work every day, I'm thinking, this is so bizarre. I'm calling the man every week that tried to chop my head off, that planned to murder me. We'd even be sharing recipes. We were talking about this. He told me about his time in the war. I know he was abused. You know, we had heard that he was abused himself when he was younger. But so anyway, what happened was, so for weeks I would call him, pray with him. This went on for 6 weeks. And then suddenly I got a call. So he died suddenly 6 weeks later and unexpectedly. He was supposed to have surgery. I mean, he wasn't dying that whole time I was talking to him. He was in bad health. He had heart issues. He would be in and out of the VA, but he died suddenly. He just didn't make it to the surgery. Before the surgery, him and I had prayed before his surgery. He told me it was coming up. And I got the call that he passed away. But when he passed away, I knew where he went, and I was okay with it now. But then I thought, God, I don't understand. Even though I was a willing participant in this whole thing, I said, I always thought a pedophile was like the worst of the worst, the lowest of the low, that they could never be redeemed. I'm using a Christianese word, redeemed, but they can never be, God would never be interested in them. Like they're a lost cause. They're just hopeless lost cause. And I said, how did you extend your mercy to him at the end of his life? Like, how do you do that? And God showed me that the same mercy that he showed my uncle was the same mercy that he had shown to me when he spared my life when I was 12, when he asked that stranger to pray for me when I was 24, when he transformed my life, when he sent my husband into my life. All the things he made, all my dreams come true. Before I became a Christian, I thought there's no hope for me to ever feel normal, like all the other women I thought felt normal. There's no hope for me to be in a normal relationship. I had never been in a normal relationship. They were always just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No hope for me to have a normal life. And God made all my dreams come true. Been married for 35 years. I live in the most beautiful house anybody could ever expect. I've had a wonderful life. God's done exceeding abundantly above all I could ask or think. And everywhere I go, wherever, if it's the grocery store, just 4 times last week, 4 different days, I said, Lord, what is going on? People say, how are you? And then that's when I told you, I say, well, I'm above ground. You know why I say I'm above ground? And I share them my story, but I also didn't tell you that when I was watching just real quick, and then I'm over with. I know we got a 15-minute limit. Oh, you're good. You're good. You can go as long as you need to go.
In the 1980s, I fell in love with the 700 Club. It was very encouraging and uplifting, all those stories. And one day there was somebody sharing their story, and they had written a book, and the thought popped in my mind, one day you're going to be on that show and you're going to write a book. And I thought, why would I be on that show and why would I write a book? I was a secretary my whole life, an executive assistant, legal assistant. 16 years later, I'm on the 700 Club, and 17 years after that, in 2019, I wrote my book called The Road to Mercy. But the reason why I share my story, and I want everybody to know, is number one, God is real. Number two, Jesus Christ is very much alive. And number three, I want to give hope to others who feel like there's no hope for them, people that have been abused. I've told so many stories wherever I go, and people will say, Mary, I've never told anybody this, and then they'll open up and tell me their story, men and women alike. But also, I want to give hope to people who feel like they've been so bad and done such evil things that their whole life, and they feel like God could never forgive them. So I share my story to give hope to the hopeless, whether they're the victim or the abuser. So that's the abbreviated version of my story.
Wow, it's powerful. Mary, it's interesting how forgiveness, right? When you forgive somebody, you said you were like 90%, you felt like you were 90% free until you forgave, right?
No, I forgave him, but until I prayed for him.
Prayed for him. Yeah. Well, it is interesting. Yeah, you're right. You forgive, and then prayer is like, that's like next level. That's breaking through. But if you think about it, that gets you free, right? When you pray for somebody and forgive them, that's, you totally, you
but maybe I hadn't forgiven him 100% like I thought I did.
That's true.
Because I didn't want him in heaven. Yeah, but now I don't want anybody to go to hell.
The power of forgiveness is amazing. Wow. What a story. What a testimony. And how wonderful that you are the one that mentored him, gave him that opportunity.
Of all people on this whole planet. During our conversation, I said to him, I can't believe, I said 1 week ago, I never thought I'd be leading you to Jesus Christ. He said, I can't think of a nicer person to have done it. Oh, and then he was telling everybody at the hospital he had his own Mother Teresa. I mean, it just was mind-blowing, just mind-blowing.
Wow. It's not how you start your race, it's how you finish it, right?
Yeah.
This man.
So God has given me a great life. I don't have a why me attitude anymore. I feel like the most blessed person on the planet to have survived. I turned 70 last year, and I'm happy for every single day that God has given me. And I'm happy that I made it to 70. My life wasn't cut short at 12 years old. Wow, Mary. You are my last call for today. And man, that's a powerful one. I'll be thinking about this conversation for a very long time. This is amazing. This is powerful. Power of forgiveness. What a story. It's like a movie. I mean, and speaking of a movie, you said you have a book. How can people find this book? Oh, it's on Amazon. It's called The Road to Mercy, A Journey of Secret Survival and Redemption by Mary Therese Hutchinson. And everybody that I know that has read it said, Mary, this should be a movie. This should be a movie. So I'm praying maybe someday God will make it into a movie.
That's why I said, speaking of the movie, the book is the transcript for the movie, and the movie is next. Well, Mary, that's amazing. Well, everyone watching, you guys make sure, get the book. Man, wow. I don't know how to end this other than to say, this is amazing. What a story. What a transformation. Right?
Yeah, my editor said my editor even said she cried at the end of the book. And
Mary, you almost made me cry on this phone call. I've yet to cry during any of my conversations, and I was very close. It was so, it's like, I was like Hollywood, right? This story, this big event that happens to you, and then you go through this
powerful
life trajectory of just highs and lows, and then you have that kind of ending. I did not see it coming. Powerful. Yeah. Wow. Well, Mary, I want to be like you when I grow up. This is powerful. Thank you so much for your time. And would you be willing,
Vladimir?
Would you be willing to share this story on the main channel on camera?
Oh, absolutely, because there's so much more to tell. I went over and over. What could I tell in 15 minutes? which are the most crucial. So yeah,
Well,
there's so
I'm
much
sending
more.
you the link right now to your phone number, the one that we connected on.
Okay.
And it's the same process. When you click on that link, you can pick a time that works best for you. And yeah, let's keep this conversation going. I'd love to get into all the details. Wow, powerful,
yeah.
Mary. Powerful.
Yeah.
We'll stay in touch. Sounds good?
Okay. Thank you so much,
God bless
Vladimir.
you. Talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You too. Okay. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If this call caught your attention, wait until you see what's coming up next. It should be on the screen right now. Go ahead and click on that video, and I'll see you there.